Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Firewall, the business bycast, where tech meets business. Get expert insights in real-world business leaders, IT experts, and the latest trends in bite-sized episodes. Stay ahead and explore what's beyond the firewall. And welcome back to Beyond the Firewall, where we always bring you amazing new technology, new business, and amazing guests. Today, like no other, we have a very special guest. Ara, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, thanks for having me. A bit about me. I am in the tech space, really focused on data and AI. I've worked in several different roles in marketing, sales, customer success. So right now I'm at a firm called Feathery, and we are really trying to change AI and automation in the wealth management space.
Wow. And that's really interesting about how you're trying to bridge the two industries today. Why don't you give us a little bit of history about Feathery and sort of the journey of how that came about and where its path is going today?
Yeah, sure. Feathery was actually started by our two co-founders, Peter and Zach. Peter came from working at Robinhood. He was part of the core onboarding team there, identified a gap at how difficult it is to onboard clients, how long technology implementations take, the complexity of it. And he really kind of got thinking that this should be simpler and easier and more flexible. So Peter went to Stanford to do his master's in AI, left the company with quite a bit of fundraising from seed founders, including Bain Capital, and then basically started Feathery. And our kind of philosophy there was to make that onboarding experience easier, specifically in the wealth management space. And then he partnered with Zach, our other co-founder, who had more experience in the insurance space and saw this as an opportunity there as well. So as a company, we mostly focus on wealth and insurance right now.
Wow, incredible story. And how long has the company been around now?
Since 2020.
Okay, so fairly young, but technically mature when you look at AI and the life of a technology company. That's pretty mature. It's not like it's started 6 months ago. So how's the journey been going? Like, are you guys seeing some serious traction with businesses sort of adopting this and really realizing that there's this amazing need?
Yeah, actually. So it's been going pretty well. So since inception, we've been profitable. We've been growing year over year. We just raised our Series A. So total right now is about 30 million in fundraising. We just released the announcement a couple of weeks ago. So there is definitely interest. And that fundraising was led by Portage. And I would say in terms of sales, like just being on the sales side and the customer success side, I would say this is a product that sells itself, which is very rare. And when you're doing a startup, you're kind of trying to convince people that they need this. But as I've been out to conferences and talking to RIAs and broker dealers, it naturally is not just a pain point, but an immediate pain point. And it's just, how do we do this? How do we fix this? The financial services industry is a highly regulated one. It also requires a lot of paperwork. So it is an immediate need. And it really changes the space in terms of how you look at AI and automation and why that's needed, because wealth management specifically is an industry where relationships matter. So you would not normally think that that's a space for AI to take over because of the relationships. But what AI can do, especially with early AI that we're looking at today, which is based on, automating things and looking at data and cleaning up data and kind of moving pieces of data across systems, it actually allows the advisors to have a higher touch relationship. So AI enablement encourages it where you normally wouldn't think that because of the industry itself. You would think, maybe people wouldn't want to go that direction. But the more free time they can have to talk to other people, the better it is.
Wow. And do you see the customers kind of demanding this? Is that another avenue where the end consumer is now saying, I need more information. I want more, more information, or I want more touch points. And that's also pushing down to the advisory firms. Because I know that for myself, I make an investment and I usually don't hear from my advisor for quite some time. And next thing you know, I'm like, how's it doing? And it's on me to kind of go in there and, prod and poke around and, like call myself a little bit more of a passive investor versus like I'm looking at my day trading I'm not that kind of an investor. So how is the market, receiving this?
It's a very competitive landscape on the RIA side. If you look statistically in the last year or so, you would have seen a lot of growth from M&A between the RIAs. They're kind of buying each other out and kind of looking at that space. So it's on a trajectory, I would say, to create like mega RIAs, I think. And so, in bringing all these companies together, trying to get the best out for the investors and taking knowledge across the board and access to specific portfolios and things that they can do with a broader backing, I think is pushing the need for a lot of automation in the operation side of the space. So that's where we're really supporting the operations and supporting the advisors to be able to automate all of the things that they can do for you when you are thinking of investing, how to make that process a lot faster, and if there are changes or conversations they should be having with you, how they can identify that. And it just allows those companies as they're merging to be able to do that at scale, right? So keep that family office feel, but be able to grow into an organization that is larger and more process based.
Interesting. And you mentioned something around regulations and compliance and stuff like that. Can you elaborate on that? Like, are the organizations that are looking at your technology concerned about that? And are the regulators now putting pressure on you to make sure that your technology is secure and compliant? Like, there's a lot of conversations about buzz around security compliance, and where does that land on your table today?
I would say it's a really important part because we typically work with larger organizations or organizations in growth mode in the wealth space. So, we have all of the SOC to the warm compliance, all that kind of FINRA stuff under, but the big ones are again growth. So there's organic growth, but then there's growth through M&A and there's growth through advisor transitions, which is essentially for anyone who doesn't know the space, because I didn't when I started, is advisors moving from one firm to another. So they usually don't own their clients, but the
Right.
clients have a right, if you love your advisor, to go with that advisor if they're moving. So how do we make sure that when that advisor is informing you that they're moving, that they're not breaking any laws? How do they transfer that data over of your records without it becoming cumbersome for you as an investor and client to have to redo all this paperwork? How do you make sure there isn't money left on the table for a really long time as these transitions are happening? So transitions is a big growth strategy for a lot of our clients where they're trying to bring the top advisors onto their firms and, recruit them. And then as well as the M&A space, being able to automate that while making sure as a client and an investor, you feel good and taken care of and without breaking any laws, stealing any data. Those are kind of the compliance areas that we support in our tool. And that's by having an audit trail of when these conversations happen, ensuring that we have kind of a snapshot of when you accepted and said, I want to move with my advisor, ensuring that the data that was provided came from you, and to make that process as painless for you as an investor and end client so that you can say, yeah, I want to come over. What do I have to do? And it's like, here, just send over your last investment statements and some of your info, and you could just drag and drop things. Is a huge game changer than saying, oh, I want to move with you. Okay, here's like 30 pages of paperwork we need to get through to do that.
Interesting. Yeah, and I've been through that before. With the monster paperwork. Even moving from one bank to another,
Yeah.
it's never an easy process. People, defer forever, and even if they're not happy with their current advisor or
hmm
financial investment firm or bank for that matter, they'll suffer through months, if not years, of issues because they know the pain of moving is just more, I guess you can say it's greater than me just enduring the inconveniences of the firm that I'm currently with. So, yeah, having a convenience on that, I think, is massive, that individuals now will have better access to portability without having to go through all the usual hurdles.
Absolutely. And then AI can kind of surface that and support that as well. So, looking at data quality and saying, are we missing key pieces of data? And when an advisor is moving, they may have 300 to 500 clients. So, how can you do that at scale quickly? And then, not just you providing your data, but maybe things are out of date. Have things changed? Has your address changed? Do you still want the same beneficiaries? How do we confirm all of those things very simply? So AI can kind of surface those things. Who's in your household? Have things changed? Looks like the last time we updated it was a while ago. Do you still, are you still married? I think there was a really fun one where you can automate a lot of things kind of back in the day. And we had a client who migrated previously with the previous vendor who did the automation, just moved it from one tool to the other. But then they had a really upset client who, said, why do you still have my ex-wife as the beneficiary for all of my accounts? And it's because they moved the data, right? So it's what checks and balances do you need to put in place for are there specific triggers we can look at? Things will still happen, that AI wouldn't notice, but AI is catching a lot of that and then supporting the advisors to say, hey, you haven't chatted with this client, or we're still waiting for this piece of paperwork from the client, and just helping the advisors focus on their day to day when they have such a big book of business.
I love that. So checks and balances, standard operating procedures, basically another fail-safe process system that will help minimize the errors and risks that can be overseen. I think it's massive because even with what we do today, when we look at onboarding and offboarding employees, depending on how you're dealing with, Joe's leaving on Friday, and Bob's starting on Tuesday. Can you make sure profiles are migrated and whatever or not? And we're human. There's an aspect that somebody would need to go back and double check and triple check to make sure, and things do get missed. So having something that can do that process automatically as part of that is just sort of a natural benefit, I think. Some people may say differently, but I think it's a beautiful benefit to have systems to verify what we're doing to potentially minimize error. So, you want to keep that balance there. I think that's an awesome capability.
I
So,
think the difference also is with like AI now. I mean, we've had notifications and triggers and alerts forever, right?
true.
I've both been implementing systems, and that's just a core capability. But the difference with AI now is AI is able to look through large sets of unstructured data and still pull those triggers in. Whereas before, triggers would be based on like, I've set a system, and if XYZ happens, send an alert or have something happen, where AI can now comb through things like documents in your Google Drive to your emails, and kind of those are big, unstructured, messy data, right? And make sense of it and be able to notify you or alert you of things that you may have missed in those data sets. I think that's a game changer because that's where a lot of that relationship communication information lives, right? It doesn't always just live in your CRM or your already predetermined data set, structured data set, right? So,
Yeah, I see that because I know that like a lot of my clients now are recording virtually all the calls, and then their calls are being dumped into an AI agent that's transcribing it. And then from there, the transcription now gets added into the CRM. So, if the person's discussing about hardware refresh or any sort of, let's say call it cybersecurity or some sort of other things that they want to achieve in the, let's call it next quarter, whatever or not, they're picking that up even on a phone call like this. And then it's already putting it into the CRM system saying, don't forget to follow up with this. So for me, if I had a verbal conversation with my advisor saying, yeah, you know what, I'm getting closer to retirement, or I want to look at some new products, I may want to invest in some higher risk items. The advisor now may have not jotted that down. And next thing you know, the agent picked that up and, from a phone call and put it into the system. So something to follow up with. So I see the massive potential there. That's
yeah,
huge.
totally.
Yeah. You were mentioning again and around the, talking about the security and the compliance again. I wanted to kind of go back there for a minute. So, I service that industry and I have been for the last, 15 plus years where I've got private, high net worth clients, firms. And a lot of those firms now are looking at, their client data as gold, right?
Mhm.
They don't want to release it. They don't want to share it. They don't want to, make any of it public in any way, shape, or form. Are you providing this infrastructure under a private model where they're, because I know that with Canada, for example, with OSFI and the regulators, some of the firms I'm dealing with, they're like, well, we want our own AI server. We want to have it private. We don't want anything on ChatGPT. And they're very concerned about where that data resides. Are you providing this both as a subscription, as a cloud based on whatever server infrastructure, or is this something that they acquire through and they're hosting it in their own ecosystem?
It is a subscription model, but we host in the country that the firm is in. So we're international in the US, AWS in the US, in Canada, that's kind of separated. So lucky for us, AWS, Microsoft, those organizations have already gone and kind of dealt with the data compliance privacy issues. So being on the AWS servers allows us to ensure that the data is kept within the residency of. So we are servicing Canadian firms, and all the Canadian data stays within Canadian servers and is protected by all of the kind of compliance and laws that the companies we partner with are providing.
Very cool. Yeah, no, that's great, because I think that would be one of the biggest concerns. I would be like, if I already said to one of my clients, hey, look, I got this really cool partnership. I think you guys are going to need to take a look at these things. And they'll be like, well, I want to keep my data very,
Definitely
contained. So I'm liking the fact that you guys already addressed all that stuff. And I'm sure you've gone through that story before. Pivoting away from security, I would love to sort of take it to this sort of next gen human interaction. I know we kind of touched on it before. People are kind of reluctant to dealing with robo advisors, and I see larger companies now are saying we don't have enough people, nor is it cost effective to have everybody go through every sort of option with a human, right? Like that ratio of the time, effort, and return on investment is limited. So, where do you see the balance coming in now with companies leveraging AI to the end customer? Are you seeing more pivoting towards that and pushing that down to the customer so it becomes a self-help, self-assessment, pool of resources and automation, and then only as a last resort or only as a high-end net worth customer are they going to interact with humans? Like, where do you see that balance and where that needle goes in when it comes to AI tools from investments in banking and insurance?
Yeah, I think that, okay, a little bit, you asked what I think, and then I think the other side is what are our clients doing?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I know.
Yeah. So with clients, I mean, I see that the space that I see happening is exactly what you said. High net worth clients still get a lot of the human touch, and they're trying to figure out how to scale at the lower levels. And that could be a lot of like, can the AI assist you to get started? Now, personally, I'm old. So when I call somebody or a bank and then I realize a robot's talking to me, it just like feels weird, you know? We just had someone join our.
Yeah, that's weird.
That's
All
okay.
right.
I'll restart it.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So interesting question. The way that I would look at it, two different points of view. What are clients doing and what are my perspectives? Clients, like you said, are looking at keeping that human touch at the ultra high net worth clients that they have, and then kind of trying to scale to the lower portfolio levels and seeing if they could introduce more of that bot that can support you. Like I said, I'm old. So for me, maybe I hate talking to the bot. So it's how can you still maybe automate some of it and not all of it so that the client still feels important, even if they aren't at the ultra high net worth category. And I think that that's the balance that all the companies are trying to figure out today. I will say that, things like Wealth Simple coming out to the mass market is changing a lot of that. We're actually, some things that we would think about people are afraid of doing on their own, or that's not always the case. So it's not just how much or how large is your portfolio and how you want to be treated, but how tech savvy are you? How interested are you in the markets yourself? So maybe the client falls somewhere in between, but they like to make their own decisions. They like to read the reports. They like to kind of have a say. So having those models out there for them to look at and maybe the final touches with the advisor, some clients would love that. They feel like they're coming in informed. The advisor becomes kind of that person who can look at your portfolio more strategically. So the advisor roles are changing. It used to be, like throw it in a portfolio management system, look at the scenarios. Every advisor knows I move the dial a little bit here and there, and then I have my 3 scenarios. I think that breed of advisors will be going away, allowing the companies to scale. But it's like, when people go to the doctors, and with the rise of Google back in the day, you'd kind of go in and you Googled everything and you were really scared you had cancer. But Google's getting better. ChatGPT's getting better. So you're going to your doctor or lawyer, very informed about the laws or the research out there. And then what your lawyer or doctor is advising you on is to say, yes, those are all great options based on your history and what I know about you and your personal dynamics. This may be the best path. It's not A to B, but it's the unique differences that a human being can still see talking to another human being. And I think we'll see the same in the wealth management space, more informed clients. And then I think that will allow a lot of these companies to scale using and taking the benefits of where can we inform the clients to the level they want to be informed at. And if they have clients who still, maybe they're older, maybe they like that, kind of figuring out what level of advisor gets to sit with them and, how important that portfolio is. So I think the conversations will get better. The value of the advisor will, I think, become more important. And then I think automation isn't as simple as what is the value of my portfolio, but what is the characteristics of my client and what's the best way to inform them.
Interesting perspective. I like that. I fully agree with that. I think we are going to elevate all of our careers to be effective. And I think that is a big conversation that most people are wondering when it comes to, call it corporate jobs. We all need to realize that we're moving away from, 50-80% of the administrative, call it basic tasks. And we need to really elevate what we discuss and how we be more strategic around the services that we render. Because even a lawyer, as you mentioned, your AI advisor can be just as effective for basic advice, but then it's more strategic in seeing the bigger picture. And that's where, the human element of, a real human lawyer is going to sit there and give you different perspectives that can be, more objective than just a robot that's going to give you some sort of tactical or call it, basic response. I like that. I think that it is the way it's going with almost every professional industry out there. I would love to have your position on that. And I know you mentioned something like Simple there. What do you see as the next gen, the younger generation that has been sort of, I call it the Uberification of society. You look at an average of a 20-year-old today, they want quotes and pricing for everything now. They're ready to, purchase today and this very second. I think that product, like a Simple, is sort of addressing that market very effectively. What do you see happening as well for the next gen of consumers, both in insurance, investors? Like, are they going to start pivoting, or are they going to continue more heavily and more demand in the automation side?
These are all of my opinions only, but I like to draw parallels.
What this podcast is for. Nah, we're personal opinions here. We're not industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like to draw parallels from other industries. So if you're looking at the Wealthsimple, I would say what's really interesting is they're starting to offer advisors now on their app. So if you want to talk to someone, here's these 3 people you can pick, you can set up a meeting. To me, that is a very similar model to, say, the healthcare industry, where we have BetterHelp. Get a therapist for $40, whoever is available. But it just depends, again, on what kind of customer you are, what you value. So if I'm that new generation who is signing up for these subscription-based, one time only, get advice when I need it, and I know a lot of them, my brother is one, and they feel like they kind of get that quick touch response. But then there are characteristics of customers who see the value, and this will be the long-term, long strategy kind of relationship management wealth managers, similar to a therapist, where if you spend a year with the therapist, where that therapist can go with you, getting to know you and all those underlying intricacies of who you are, is very different than a therapist that you've paid $40 and signed up with BetterHelp. So it's like, Is it an immediate fix, a band-aid, or is it? So I think there'll be a different level of advisors. And I think a lot of the young people are very attracted to, I've done all the research. I just need to talk to someone for an hour. And I think we'll see a lot of that, increase in the commercial space. But then I think that over time, as this generation builds significant wealth and really looks at those portfolios, there will be value in the person who's known you for a long time and, who can kind of understand the way you're going to grow more than a statistical model and analyzing the model, which is a different type. That's that one-time investor thing that Wealthsimple is offering, in my opinion, than if you were going with a family office of a ultra high net worth firm who's gotten to know your family. So I think that Gen Z, it depends on what level of investor and where they are in their journey of their financial growth.
Yeah, no, I think that's a natural progression. I think that, when you look at when I was younger, for that matter, you wanted that instant gratification. Even in our generation or
Yeah.
my generation, it was like you wanted to have that experience of buying something and enjoying it right there. And then as you mature, you realize now it's not an arbitrary decision. You're not investing, you're not buying insurance just on price. You're looking at other factors. You've got family, you potentially have trusts, you have, multiple homes. You need to be more strategic on it. And just saying, oh, I'm going to invest my money into, whatever option that's in front of me is usually not the case for most people that have saved up enough money. You put 5,000 in the bank, it really doesn't matter too much. People that have significant amount of money in their investment portfolio, it makes a huge difference on where you're going and how strategic you need to be. So
Yeah.
I see that.
Even like the human genes, right? Like think of like when you're young, you're bullish and you think you know everything. It's kind of, we're built that way so that the young people build the next companies and et cetera. But they're the same way in their planning, right? So, oh, I've talked to the AI, I know everything. I just need to like figure out these little items. Maybe I'll talk to an advisor. But as you get older, I feel like you're like, I don't know everything. And you're just kind of release that trust. And I just want someone else to like think about it, manage it, advise, ask opinions. So I feel like that is also a natural, like, depending on the age. So when you say the next generation, how old are they at the time that we're looking at how they're investing? I wonder if that like natural human DNA that we can't stop as we age and we think and we release control as a part of wisdom and growing. I wonder if we look at them at different intervals and then see that their behavior is very similar to ours over time. But who knows?
Yeah, it's you nailed it when you come to that bullish aspect of it. Like, you're young, you have such a long runway. You think, "Oh my God, I've got a lifetime away to get to retirement." I can't even see it. It's so far away. So everything I do is a risk. I don't have really many worries about, if I succeed or fail over the next decade because, between 20 and 30, what does it really impact me? Like I got so much time, I got so much to recover. And so the high risks are there. And you can take those high risks because usually you don't have a family, you don't have mortgages, you don't have all these other things to worry about. And even if you do, you still have a lot of opportunities to bounce back. But, as you kind of step, further down the road, you're realizing, wait a minute, I don't want to be doing what I did when I was in my 20s and 30s. So whatever I'm doing has got to be a lot more, conservative or a lot more strategic so that I'm not making mistakes and I'm, not having to rebuild my wealth at 55. So it is always an interesting perspective of how your mind and your mind changes on you without you even noticing. So, speaking about mindset, how have you been seeing leadership and management of these firms adopting it and being receptive to the changes that are happening in front of them? From your clients and prospects and the people that you're talking to today. How's that happening today?
I would say we're also seeing a new generation of leadership happening in these wealth management firms. I think that's also a big part of why we're seeing a lot of M&A activity is these wealth managers, financial advisors who built these firms are coming to retirement. So they're trying to figure out, do I pass this on to someone in the family? Do I sell my business? How do I take what I've built and continue my legacy? And so in that, we're seeing a lot of leadership changes. in the firms, whether it's based on a merger that's happened or because, someone is taking over the firm. We're seeing a lot of women as well in leadership positions at these wealth management firms, which I think is awesome as a woman, and really kind of consider that. And so from the leadership level, I think that any C-suite executive that I speak to, and I speak to a lot of them, they actually show up to all of the conferences, which been in the tech space for a while. And I'll tell you, in most industries, when I go to a conference, I'm lucky if anyone that's like VP level shows up. It's usually like directors who are there to learn, take the information back. But the C-suite is so engaged because the industry is changing so dynamically that you'll see a lot of them at these conferences and events. And they are very curious about AI and they understand the changes that need to happen in order to stay competitive because the market is very, very competitive. So I'm seeing a lot of forward thinking, innovative executives, more than I've seen in any other industry at the leadership level, which makes it really easy to kind of then adapt those technologies within their firms. They're carving out, onboarding teams, transitions teams that are ultra focused in these areas. And how can we make ourselves more efficient? So if you have the C-suite who understands innovation and has a really good idea of what the North Star can be, then that can empower the team, I think. And we're starting to see, at least I'm seeing a lot of that out there just naturally. It's not a conversation where I have to convince an executive that this is important. You should look at it right now. It's weirdly just prime time.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're seeing that. And I know that for me, I do the conference circuit. And last year, I think I attended over a dozen conferences in less than 12 months. It was,
Wow.
I lived in a suitcase. But, we're in a really interesting time when you think about what's happening today. And granted, I'm in the tip of the spear, right? Like, when you look at security, AI, it's impacting every aspect of companies and ecosystem. So for us, we're pushing that technology down to our customers. We're advising our customers on what's on the horizon and how they need to be able to pivot. But I think it's critical. And I think it's great to hear that, other people and other leaders in different sectors are having the same sort of thought process because, with what we're going through today, it is literally a game changer, no different than we went through a generation of internet,
Mhm.
email. We're in that another era of, major kind of like upward hockey stick kind of evolution and business productivity. Those that will, put their head in the sand will be left behind. I fully see the number of those people will no longer exist in business within 5 years because they were too late to the game. They don't need to be at the forefront, but they need to understand what's happening so that they know what pieces are going to come into effect and when to implement them. And maturity is coming sooner than they think. It's not a 10-year runway. It's 1 to 3 years. And that's a critical thing for all businesses to understand.
When I talk to some of these executives, though, they're trying to balance speed with, like you said, knowledge and speed and where to go. And then they're trying to look at the ROI of these investments that they're making on these AI. And I had an executive tell me recently, and I thought it was really interesting. We were just talking about those meeting note takers and how amazing they are, and they help you get your task list. But
Mm,
he pointed out something that I was like, wow, you're right. Yes, they create the summaries for you, but what it's also created is not a generation, but a group or a culture, I should say, where now we just go and skim the summary and we rely on the tasks. So what we miss is that human element that you might notice in a meeting where if you only had a notebook and you can't sit down and write notes, you might write like 3 words of chicken scratch, but that'll trigger something in your brain about something that might not be obvious to an AI. It's not a to-do list. It's the way the customer like smirked at something you said or showed an interest in something else. And so we've started to rely so much on these note takers that we may be, and this is a theory, but I'd be interested to test it, that we may be missing those like extra moments of opportunity that could lead to explosive growth. So AI would kind of like reading the summary, doing the to-do list, you have kind of a steady growth because it's learning on that. But those like nuances, you might recognize them in the meeting, then you run to the next meeting, you never took the notes and you forget a month later. And then all you do is go read your summary and you look at your task list. You may have missed a few things there. And then she mentioned, okay, how often do you have to go back and listen to that recording a second time? So now we're so obsessed with getting every detail. Are we actually becoming more productive? So is it a productivity thing? Is it an intelligence thing? What is the ROI you're measuring? Because I think a lot of the times also with AI, we get the ROI is always based on productivity, and maybe productivity isn't the reasoning. Maybe having that recording and listening to it a second time allows you to have a deeper, better conversation. Who knows? So that balance of what are people doing with the recording? Are they just reading the summary? If they are wasting their time re-listening, is there value in the time that was spent versus just because if you look at the productivity, that would be lower productivity.
Correct.
So I think that it's very interesting to see leaders thinking about the AI pilots they've put in place and what makes it successful or not successful. And are we even measuring the right metrics?
Yeah, it's very true. And actually, I've already started to see products out there to start analyzing for, again, being at the tech sector side. We're looking at products now that are looking at productivity around how many minutes a day companies are doing like 1 hour Zoom meetings or team meetings, and then how much time they're spending on, reviewing materials and stuff like that versus actually doing productive work. And it's really now like, can we push these meetings to 45 minutes? Can we push these meetings to half an hour versus always booking a default 1 hour meeting? And I agree with you, like on the other element of it, two things that are happening. Number one is you don't necessarily have people focused on a Teams or Zoom meeting or a virtual meeting because they could be like, okay, I'm logged in and I'm texting, or, I've got a split screen and I'm, messaging, even though I'm kind of looking at my screen and I've got my whatever chat window coming up. So I'm cross communicating. So I'm not truly focused because I'm relying on my note taker. At the same time, I'm missing out on nuances that are happening in the conversation. And then the tone, like meeting, there's something that never gets picked up really in notes is tone, right? So if somebody's angry or somebody's resistant or somebody is, hesitant, you're not getting tone of a conversation in a note taker. And that's part of the reason why way back in one of my first podcasts I was talking about when people were going to go back to work and, like people back to office. Cause like one of the first episodes I did was like, are we ever going to go back to real human? And I thought there is no replacement on doing a virtual meeting versus sitting across the table, body language, shaking hands, being able to smile and actually see people's expressions. And then if there's multiple people in the room, you see who's distracted and who's focused. And most of the time when you're in the same room with other people, most people have to be in focus at all those meetings because management would be looking, going, you have somewhere better to be. Whereas if it's a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting or a virtual meeting with 50 people, you can't really see all 50 people on the call. So you don't know what people are doing, and there's no sort of like real reading the room in that regard. So
And then
yeah,
even
I fully agree.
I'm going to say
Sorry?
it's not productivity like time wise, like time saved from note takers and whatever. But then also after I've put this in, has my ROI gone up? Because like you said, if you miss that nuance or that opportunity that you could have discovered. So this was a very interesting point. She said, I've implemented all of these AI tools, but so it saved X number of hours for all my staff, but we haven't increased revenue. So what are they doing with all this free time? Is it actually free time or is it kind of what's the word, like imagined free time that
Yeah.
we're bringing up? So like you
Yeah.
said,
A false sense of security kind of thing.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on that. I think that's a whole different conversation that
Oh
you would
no, we
actually get
got off
into,
topic.
about, the false sense of AI, and is it really making you more profitable, or is it just all hype right now? And yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like now that Claude is, I just saw on my Claude, depending on how you pronounce it, that they're going to be pushing into token consumption as of September, October, which means now your $20, $30 monthly subscription will no longer be just your baseline fee. you will have to pay for additional usage. And if you read the T's and C's, it automatically charges your credit card for the extra token consumption per request.
Yeah.
So it's not like a preloaded credit card where you'll be like, okay, I'm going to buy $100 worth of tokens. You can rack up $5,000 worth of tokens and you will just start seeing your credit card being charged by the AI agent because you use it so much. So we'll see what that does as of September, and we'll see how much people change their, let's call it, consumption and dependent on the usage of the technology if it becomes a $1,000 a month personal expense to be that productive. So,
Yeah, I think I'm hearing from some companies, not a lot, but some companies where based on that announcement, they're now telling staff that so first it was go into Claude, connect your email, connect everything, but now disconnect those things and we're only going to focus on core systems, which we'll see how like you're kind of losing that value that people have gotten a little addicted to or attached to. So who knows? It'll be interesting to see how that moves.
yeah, I just got offered a software technology that, is integrated with Claude. And I was like, not going to use it. Because if I roll that out across 30 to 50 people, now that $30 potentially is going to be, $100 per employee per month or 200 or 500. And we do not yet know how much that's actually going to transpire to physical dollars once you use it every day within that ecosystem. So I fully see a shift, but rumor has it is that I think ChatGPT and the other ones are waiting to see what that looks like before they announce their
Mhm.
decision to also move to a consumption based model. And then we'll see where this all lands because there's a lot of speculation and a lot of, rumors around the consumption world that we're moving towards.
A little bit, but these companies will have to always find a way to survive. And so if consumption scares customers and they actually end up spending less, they're going to have to solve for that so they can get you more engaged with their tools again. So
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know. I don't know if it's a long-term thing. It might be a short-term blip that maybe in a couple of years is a non-issue.
We'll see. Listen, I think it's a lot of, I would almost want to have like a round table of speculation with like six people and see
That'd
what,
be
what
fun.
everybody's perspective of this consumption world we're moving towards. But speaking about that,
Mhm.
so looking ahead, this is sort of like close to the top of the hour for our podcast. I usually like to kind of move towards what's up in the future for you guys. So looking forward 26, 27. What does the future look like for you and Feathery, and where do you see the technology going and the industry moving forward to?
Yeah. Well, a big part of our Series A raise was to invest more on the AI side and the intelligence side. So, like a lot of other firms today, our focus on the AI is our OCR, our document intelligence capabilities and ability to read any kind of document. So, down to like a trust that was written in the 1940s by hand. Being able to decipher and read that. That's where our focus has been. A lot of automating between systems. So becoming the AI operating model for your wealth management firm is kind of the focus of before we were really at use cases of automation. How do we automate the workflow and utilize AI to kind of make that and each point of the workflow a bit more efficient. But now we're thinking of AI as your operating model for your wealth management firm. And how do you take that holistic view now that you've integrated all of your tech stack because it's all integrated at different points of your workflow? But is there additional intelligence that we can surface if AI is that top line operating model? And so those are kind of the areas that our AI team is looking into, in addition to things like assisting. So, some of the things that we're releasing in the near term and have just released is like Robin Build and Robin Assist. So, Robin assist advisors. You're driving. Hey, Robin, who should I follow up with today? And the assistant can say, these are the clients that need follow ups. This is the follow up needed. I've drafted your email. So, very similar to what you're talking about with Claude, but understanding the workflows of the specific firm and the requirements of the client and pushing things along. So, and then Robin Build, which is the technology is changing for our customers. So customers don't want to sow every time they need to change something. They don't want a month implementation timeline, 3 months, here's 100K, like we need to update this. it went from customization to then configuration, where we could say you could change some stuff, but customers don't want configuration anymore. They want customization at their fingertips. So just like Claude, Robin Build will go in there and you can say, update this workflow to include XYZ forms, or California law requires this extra, checks and balances, make sure they're incorporated, and allowing the ops team without a development knowledge background to be able to build, but then not worry that, the AI, because, nowadays, if you do vibe coding, the AI misses things that a developer would know. I think that problem will slowly get solved, especially with Robin, what we're trying to do, because it's taking the intelligence of our team for the last 6 years, building these workflows. So when it pushes out a workflow, it's taking into consideration the things that we've learned versus just building it in kind of the white space. So I think that those two technology things will be a game changer for our clients. Don't need to call us if you want to change something. You have all the power in your hands. Everyone's supported. Things get pushed through. Those are immediate, and then long-term intelligence. And, I think many years ago, I was thinking the world of like Power BI when it came out for Microsoft, and oh my God, how smart it is. But now integrated into everything and looking at those unstructured data sets and changes that you didn't predict, because business intelligence is you're telling it what to look for, right? And I think getting to a true AI model is surfacing things that you didn't even know to look for.
Wow. Those are amazing closing remarks there. I love it. Wow. Listen, Ara, I think having you on this podcast was incredible. The perspectives and everything. I want to thank all of our listeners for listening in and following our podcast. Ara, I want to thank you for coming out today. It was a real pleasure, and look forward to having you back.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, we'll see you soon. And again, thank you everybody for listening, and please like and subscribe. We'll see you soon.